Hi, I'm Tom,
And I'm Ellie.
and welcome to But He's Catholic. And this week's question from Ellie, so we're going away from our kind of Easter theme, so we're moving on to more kind of general topics. Ellie, what's your question for this week?
So it's something that I have always been really interested in because I think it is, as far as I'm aware, specifically Catholic, not Christian. And it's one of those ones that you see in films and TV, and it's confession. So
Yeah.
obviously my Father, I've sinned, and going into the booth and your face is hidden. But yeah, I'm just intrigued about where does it come from, what actually happens. Like I would have no idea where to start with what I would say. Like, do you get training on what to say when you go in there? And then also just the idea of you confess your sins and then you're forgiven. So I guess, do you want to start with what actually happens when you go to confession?
Yeah, so what happens when you go to confession is you wait outside. So normally it's in like a kind of a side bit of a church. So you kind of wait outside and reflect on what you've done wrong and what you need to repent. And then you go in and then you do the classic, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned.
So you actually say that?
Yeah, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, or bless me, Father, for I have sinned. And then you say normally how long it's been since your last confession.
And how long should it have been?
Well, all Catholics are officially required to go once a year.
Oh,
So
okay.
normally, all Catholics should go to confession before Easter so they can receive the Eucharist.
Right.
So that's the one condition of being one of the conditions of being an active Catholic.
And am I right in thinking that you're meant to go before any other sort of big thing? So, like, I think before our son got baptised, you went.
I went, yeah. I don't think normally it's about yourself.
Okay.
So I went to confession before we got married.
Yeah.
In a church. So yeah, you're supposed to kind of before any sacrament, you should do the sacrament in a state of grace if possible. But you're supposed to go to confession every time before you. If you've committed a mortal sin, you're supposed to go. So sins are broken up into venial sins, which are kind of, don't want to go into too much, but yeah, venial sins are kind of less bad sins.
Things like lying.
Lying, maybe. Well, it depends what the lie
Depends
is
on
about.
the lie.
And depends on the conditions of the lie. But
Not going to church.
No, that's a mortal sin.
Oh gosh, okay,
Yeah,
sorry. I thought that wasn't too serious.
Mortal sins are anything that directly separates you from God. So I think, if I remember my conditions correctly, so a mortal sin has to be a grave act.
Well,
so
like,
something really, really bad.
Murder.
Yeah, okay, murder. You have to do it in full knowledge that you're doing it, so that you know that it's bad and you shouldn't be doing it. And you should fully will to do it, that you want to do it. So there's the will to want to do it, there's the knowledge that it's bad, and there's also grave. So that's a mortal sin, and that means a separation of God. So a venial sin would be a sin which doesn't meet all those
requirements,
those conditions.
Right.
So venial sins don't need to worry about too much. But every time you've committed a mortal sin, you need to go to confession. So forgive me, Father, for I've sinned. It's been, I don't know,
2 weeks,
7 years since my last confession, and then you rattle off all your mortal sins and venial sins if you can remember them, and then you do an act of contrition, which has normally been written down for you, but basically it's, oh God, I'm so sorry for everything I've done wrong. And
so when you say an act of contrition, it's you say something like a prayer.
The act of contrition is an act of contrition. You can do your own act of contrition. An act of contrition just means an act of being sorry, but normally the act of contrition is written down on a little laminated bit of paper.
Wait, so it's fixed?
It's not fixed. Well, it is fixed normally, but you could do your own act of contrition.
And what does he slide out the which one it is based on what you've done?
The act of contrition is always the same.
So whether you've murdered someone or whether you've not been to church for 2 weeks, either way you're going to get the same slip of laminated paper with the act of contrition.
So this is the act of contrition.
Wow.
As always, oh my God, I'm so very sorry that I've offended you, and I detest all my sins because I dread the loss of heaven. But this is from the Archdiocese of Washington. But essentially, it's always
a fixed sort of. You don't need to read it out.
You can see here. There's a lot of,
if you have a Google,
types of acts of contrition that we can look at. While we're googling this, but it's essentially the same thing. Of, oh God, I'm so sorry that I hate the fact I've sinned against you. Please help me never to sin again.
Right. So it's basically a prayer.
Yeah, agreed. And then they'll give you your act of penance, which helps you kind of atone for the sins. So normally it's the classic 3 Hail Marys and an Our Father kind of thing.
So again, just some prayers on a rosary.
Doesn't have to be. I think it can, penital sin, the act of penance can be other stuff. But
then never seem to be big things. It's not like, oh, go and do 200 hours of community service.
No.
It's basically just various prayers.
Yeah, commonly it's prayers. Okay. But they can be. I've never experienced it myself, but I think they can be for the greater crimes. Yeah. Greater sins, they can be other things.
Doing good for people.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, and these tend to be written down into like a penital book.
And how do you decide what it is that you're gonna like confess? Just for a book standard person who's not really done anything particularly wrong. Like, I guess if you only go once a year, then maybe... Do you have, like, a big, long list? Are you going to, like, list them all?
Yeah, you just list them all. Yeah, you think about all the things. Any time you've gone against Catholic teaching, you rattle them off.
All right, so you genuinely might sit there and rattle, like, 30 things off?
Yeah, sometimes. I think if you go more regularly, I think you probably go more into, like, how you commit it and why. You might focus on just one. You might go into quite a lot of detail about...
Oh, you explain it?
Yeah, and you explain it, or how many times you've done it. Since the last time, so
oh wow,
yeah. So
I've used the Lord's name in vain 270 times.
Sometimes, yeah. Not everyone confess. I mean, I don't know what happens in other people's confessions. But...
you can let us know if you feel like it. I know it's meant to be private. There's so many secrets in this religion. I feel like every time I'm like, you can tell us, and then you're like, no. So many secrets. Well. I think that's interesting.
Okay, so that's what happens in the confessional.
Okay, interesting. And then the priest. So he gives you that, and then it's like you sneak out and
then you've been cleansed of your mortal, and if you've confessed them, your venial sins.
Lovely.
And then, but to kind of complete the process of being in a state of grace, of true grace and true union with God, you then need to have Holy Communion. So that's why they normally offer it before a mass.
Oh, yes.
So a lot of churches traditionally, and more and more commonly at the moment, is that people will
go a bit
early to mass, or have it during mass, and then they can have the Holy Communion. That completes the process of you becoming fully in a state of grace. But if you don't do that, that's absolutely fine. The confessional will ensure that you then are able to go to heaven, because if you don't have your mortal sins cleansed before your death, that means you're going to hell.
Yes, I thought that was something and that's why you get the last rites.
You have the Eucharist. Yeah, exactly. You have your last rites where you do confession, and you have the Eucharist. You have the Eucharist. If you have confession, then the Eucharist, that means you can go straight to heaven. But if you have confession, and then as you step outside, die, you'll be cleansed of your mortal sins. You won't be going to hell, but you might have to go to purgatory for a little bit, because you won't be cleansed of your venial sins. The Eucharist is required for you to be in a complete state of grace.
So basically don't leave the church till you've also had the Eucharist. Just in case.
Just in cases.
Well, I guess the big question now is, and hopefully it's something that you'd be able to answer, this is one of the things I always struggle with, is, so you murder someone in complete cold blood. You go and say to the priest, "Forgive me, Father, I have sinned, I've committed murder." You do these acts of penitence, and then it's fine, you can go to heaven still.
Well, I feel like it'll be more than a few Hail Marys. I think it might be the act of penitence. I think a priest once told me it could be that you have to go to prison for a bit.
Oh, okay, so they might just say...
you have to go and hand yourselves in. Maybe. It depends, it's up to the priest what the penance is.
So basically, you could still go to heaven, but you'll have to like jump through a lot of hoops first, and you'd have to genuinely be sorry. And
the question might be, does anyone else know about this? And if the answer's no, then maybe they would be saying,
go and hand yourself.
Or they might be in a situation where it does happen, where the priest will withhold absolution until you go hand yourself in, because they don't have to absolve you.
Yeah, and then you're basically temporarily excommunicated.
So you withhold absolution until you go and sort yourself out.
Okay, and then...
So I don't think it's as simple as you just go in and be like, I've killed all these people.
And then they go,
and I'm going to go and do it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's
too simplistic.
People misrepresent.
I guess that also leads me into, though, you say, well, it's up to the priest. That then leaves a lot of room for trouble, I guess, in that not looking at murder, obviously, but like sort of other sins, like living in sin with the partner. I mean, living in sin, but these days you'd think most priests would be like, yeah, but it's modern day, like, fair enough. Like, obviously, if you intend to marry them, then it's fine, or that kind of thing. Whereas some priests might turn around and go, no, it's living in sin. You cannot have communion until you marry
Agreed.
them. That seems wrong to me, that the individual priest can decide something that, like, momentous for a Catholic.
Yeah, I think that there is an issue there, but no, I'm not really sure.
I guess it's
Yeah,
we found a
really
flaw.
Sure no, I wouldn't say a flaw in the system, but yeah.
Oh no,
No, there is no.
of course not. You couldn't say that.
No, there's not a flaw in the system, but I think you've got to trust priests that will stick to the teaching of the Catholic Church.
Or
but
you just find a different priest.
No, because then you're just trying to play a game, aren't you? But yes, you're right. There are priests that would take certain issues differently.
Yeah.
And will say some things are perfectly fine, while other priests would not. But then, yeah, the power and responsibility in that situation is on the priest, not on the layperson.
Yeah. Okay. That's a pretty good answer.
But no, you are right. Priests have lots and lots of power, but that doesn't mean priests don't have power because they disagree with each other. This power has been given to them by Christ through the apostolic succession. So, but yeah, I completely agree with your point there. There can be disagreements about how to do the confession properly.
Okay, nice to have maybe kind of scored a bit of a point there. Not that we look at it like that. Yeah, I guess then, so we've done the sort of practical side of things, what's it actually about and what's it actually like, but I guess why. So I said how, I think I'm right in saying that it's just Catholics that do confession.
Off the top of my head, I know Lutherans I think might do it. I definitely know Eastern Orthodox Christianity has confession.
Okay.
They're different, so there's like in the box like us.
Okay.
They do what is slightly more public, and you don't have to. They have the office of confessors, so most of the time people just use a priest, but you can like nominate someone else to be your confessor.
Okay.
You know, like medieval kings or Tudor kings, monarchs would have
could confess.
They'd have a confessor. That would be a priest. Do you remember, like, they'd always have a confessor? There'd be a priest.
But a specific one person. For them that they trusted
Eastern
to keep
Christianity, Orthodoxy, very similar, but that's more normally, that would be like a religious monastic person or a monk or nun or something, rather than like always being a priest. But in the Catholic Church, yes, it's always a priest, but it exists in other types of Christianity.
Just not like C of E.
I think some parts of the Anglican Church do it. I think probably the more, because you get Anglo-Catholics,
the high
church.
Yeah,
I think they still do it. So no, I think it is a Christian-wide belief.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's existed since the early parts of the church.
Well, this is what I was going to come on to. I was going to say on to like, why is it such an important thing? And I guess you've already touched on it, cleansing the sins. But yeah, I guess, do you want to go into the sort of the theology of it, history?
So it's always been there since the earliest days. So Jesus told the apostles to confess your sins to each other, pray with each other, confess your sins to each other. And then there's kind of two lines where he says, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you unbind will be unbound. And when he's when he comes back after the resurrection, and he tells them that whatever sins you forgive will be forgiven in heaven. So I think that's John and Matthew, off the top of my head. So there's these a couple of times where Jesus essentially is saying to the apostles that it's your job, you should be confessing sins to each other.
Yeah.
And that also, you as the apostles, with my power that I'm giving to you, have the power to forgive sins or not forgive sins. And whatever decision you make, that then correspond with how people are treated in heaven.
All right, so you say treated in heaven, so it's not a case of won't go to heaven.
Well, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. So he's suggesting whatever you won't forgive, what is not forgiven during confession, won't be undone later. Priests and bishops with the apostolic succession, that power that was given to them by Jesus, they have the power to forgive sins or not to forgive sins. Yeah. And then since then, that's kind of confession's been there as part of the earliest church. So first couple of centuries, we have lots of examples of confession being a thing. The only awkward thing I always find is up until the very early Middle Ages, most of it's public confessions. Right. So most Christian communities practice public confession, both in like the East and in the West.
I guess it's a bit like voting, because voting used to be a public thing, didn't it?
Yeah. So
the idea being that your community is so tight-knit that everyone knows everyone's sins already.
Yeah, but that'd be way awkward, wouldn't it? Having to confess sins public. Because I remember doing a module at uni when I was doing the Carolingians. I don't know if you remember, I was doing like Charlemagne and all that. And all the sources then would always talk about like how important it was for everybody to be doing like public confession once a year, which I just find... Yeah. Very awkward.
Airing your dirty laundry.
Yeah, exactly. But
I guess the point is, does that maybe not make you think twice before committing a sin if you know you've got to confess in public?
Shame, maybe.
Yeah. Definitely there's things you might go, I'm going to do this, and then you go, actually, if I have to say that in front of everybody that I've done that, I'm going to not do it in the first place.
Yeah, maybe. But that's so established by Jesus in the New Testament. Straight away becomes part of the life of the church, is an integral part of the church. But yeah, up until about the early Middle Ages, public confession has started to die out, and then it gets replaced by what we kind of see it as now, especially in the West, having very private confessions in a box.
Where the priest can't even see you.
Where the priest can't see you, and that you have this kind of like these penal books which say like what the penance should be for each sin. Lots of historians argue that's the Celtic influence, so Irish Christianity, which developed quite in an isolated way. When those missionaries start going, as well as like Anglo-Saxon missionaries start taking Celtic, English Catholicism into Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire, that kind of gets rid of earlier forms of the confession, especially like public confession, and the confessional as we know it, and the seal of confession, this confession done in private, that starts to become the more modern practice.
This whole seal of privacy or whatever it's
seal
called.
Of confession.
Seal of confession. What happens if you break it?
That is, a priest can be, and probably would be, defrocked for being...
Okay, wow.
So your priesthood would be undone.
And what about you? If you told me?
I think that's immortal. No, I think you're allowed to break your seal. I think it's just the priest that can't break it. Off the top of my head, I know a priest would be definitely defrocked.
Because you'd think that actually, like, if it's your sins, if you want to share it with...
I'll have to double check that, but I think... Why don't you check and tell me next week? There
you go, listeners. That's your homework, is to check and let us know.
I think you can tell people your own sins, but I know a priest would certainly be defrocked.
Very serious.
Which is why, like,
offense
you
for
can't.
him.
I think it's as a priest, you won't be forced to.
Oh, it's like the doctor thing. Like, we won't disclose what you tell unless you're going to do like grave harm to somebody.
No, even then it's stronger. The seal of confession can never be broken.
Oh wow! So if I went in and said I'm planning on murdering my husband, they couldn't call the police on you.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Isn't that a film?
Yeah, that does vaguely ring a bell.
It's like the guy keeps coming in and saying he's going to kill the priest, but the priest can't do anything about it.
I don't know. I thought it was. I can't remember. There's a little bell of recognition.
Yeah, maybe it's been done a few times, the premise, but basically, like, whatever happens in the confessional is guaranteed by the seal of confession. The priest can't act in any way differently from how he was before he heard that news.
Right.
So there's nothing he can do about it. He can't, like, subtly tell people.
I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like if someone's going to be murdered, surely you should have the right to call the police.
It's the seal of confession, like, can't be broken.
I guess there's no point confessing something if...
And it stops because a priest can't be used... The seal of confession can't be used to force priests to... Because of that, they can't be forced to give evidence in court either.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've learned about what happens in confession. We've learned about, I guess why the history of doing it, that it goes all the way back to Jesus. And you managed to answer quite well my questions, my more challenging questions about...
Yeah, that was the hardest one yet.
Yeah. I think you've explained it really well, but it still doesn't really make sense to me that you can do these really bad things and just be like, oh yeah, I did this, I feel sorry, here's a couple of prayers. And I get that, like, you've genuinely got to be contrite, and it's not necessarily just do a few prayers if it's something really serious.
That's the thing, you do have to be genuinely contrite. I think, again, people misrepresent it by, like, there has to be genuine contrition.
But I'm not going to go through circumstances, but there's loads of different situations in the world, in like someone's life, where they might do something really awful, really, really hurt somebody, and they do regret it, and they say sorry to the person, and they, like, I guess, face the consequences of their actions, but they still get to go to heaven.
Well, but anyone could be forgiven.
Yeah, I guess.
No one's beyond the forgiveness of God.
And I guess that's another huge point of Catholicism, isn't it?
We can do a whole episode on eschatology and forgiveness. But yeah, I don't think that's... Yeah. I don't think that's unjustified, actually, in terms of, like...
I guess it's a really...
eternal universal justice.
I guess it's a really nice thing, a nice positive, I guess, of the Catholic Church, which often, like, I guess, is criticised and thought of as negative, is that actually everyone can be redeemed. There is no... like, oh, you've lost your chance now.
There's no us and them.
Well, more just there's no, like, final, well, no, you've ruined your chances of getting to heaven. Like, if you genuinely mean it, you can always come back.
Yeah, and I think that the danger of when you start being like, certain things are unforgivable and certain people are better, then you get this weird situation like with the Pharisees in the Bible, where they... I
don't know what that is.
Well, that could be a whole other episode about forgiveness. But, like, what the Pharisees and how they were talking about, like... You know, like Mary Magdalene was supposed to be, people say she was a prostitute. And they were like, why is he hanging around with tax collectors and prostitutes? Like, there's this idea of, like, us and them, the dirty people who can't be forgiven for their sins because they're unclean, and us, the Pharisees, also. And you can create this, like, not two-tier society in terms of wealth or class, but two-tier in terms of, like, morality and being, what's the word, self-righteousness. That
I guess
certain people are unclean and unforgivable, whereas certain us, we're better than you.
I guess a bit like you get like journalists, like, you're the worst, estate agents, you're the worst.
Yeah.
No offence to any journalists or estate agents, but being like, oh, you're unredeemable.
Yeah, certain types of people are unredeemable. I think obviously then you've got murderers, and that would be more extreme case of the argument. But I do think if you start saying some people shouldn't be forgiven, some people, the second you start saying some people are kind of beyond the pale,
it's a slippery
and
slope,
can't be forgiven by God, then you create this kind of two-tier self-righteous society.
Yeah, and where do you draw the line?
It's very rare for the self-righteous to actually be much better than the sinners they compare themselves to. Yeah,
and I guess it's also nuanced as well in terms of, like, one type of sin, it could be done in so many different ways, it then becomes too complex to say yes or no.
Well, like, lying's the famous one, where you go around. In my A-level philosophy class, ethics class, you just go around in circles about whether lying is wrong.
Yeah.
Because there's so many conditions under which you'd lie.
Yeah, and then you've got white lies,
lies under torture, lies to save a life,
Yeah.
So I think to be like, confession's too much of an easy way out.
Yeah.
Is actually...
It's just too...
Actually, it's easier to just apply the simplistic view of it, that everyone can seek forgiveness if they're contrite.
Yeah.
Which I think is a much better way than being like...
No.
Trying to analyse people's sins and trying to say whether they can be forgiven or not.
Yeah, okay. At the 11th hour, I think you have convinced me, actually, that, it's maybe it is the best system. Because, like you say, as long as you're truly, truly sorry and you do something to redeem yourself,
and that's
whatever's
not up
appropriate.
To us or the priest, really. That's up to God, whether the sacrament of confession's been truly achieved.
Yeah. Well, that's a good place to stop, I think. Thank you very much for that nice whistle-stop tour of confession. I'm glad to hear that it is actually quite similar to what it's like in the films, because that would have been sad if you turned around and were like, oh no, that's all just Hollywood guff. But thank you for that. This has been But He's Catholic. Join us again next week. And also, please give us a follow wherever you get your podcasts. Please drop your questions in the comments and go and follow us on Twitter as well. Bye.
Goodbye.